Hey everyone, Sal here with another video to hype up Guardian. I'm sure not enough people are doing this, right? Well, I'm going to hype it up specifically for solo self-found. I think the game is increasingly solo self-found friendly, especially this patch for some reasons I'll get into in future videos, and Guardian is an amazing ascendancy for a first character in any league or game mode, I think, but especially solo self-found. And I'm in softcore, so that's where my opinion comes from. Might be different in hardcore, but I suspect most of my viewers are in softcore as well. In the background, you'll see an Uber Elder fight. Does have a few deaths because of the nature of my current defensive setup, which I'll get into in a minute. But for the most part, Guardian, I've been enjoying a lot. It's a very smooth playstyle from start to finish, like zero gear. The ascendancy is just so strong. And I do think they'll end up nerfing it, but I kind of am hopeful that this maybe shows them how nice it can be to have some power coming from your class at this level. The Sentinel of Radiance, specifically, is so good for the early game. It was one of my fastest leveling times with no gear. No, it was my fastest leveling time without any gear. And I was like accidentally bricking my damage for about a third of the leveling process. And I still got to maps in about 3.5 hours. So it's pretty nuts. The Sentinel of Radiance's Righteous Fire effect can carry you pretty hard. I've seen people saying, it drops off in yellow maps, drops off late white maps, etc. Has not been my experience. I thought people were hyping it up that it got even that far on so little. And when I started playing it, I realized what they were talking about. It's a very smooth convocation on left click is what I've been doing the entire character. Very smooth process of you shield charge, you go to walk again, you activate convocation, summons the Sentinel to you, everything around you dies immediately, through to like yellow maps. You can scale health and damage to the point that it is still quite effective in red maps. Like an Alcan Go tier 16, I still notice it sometimes when I summon it or it gets called over with convocation. A white or blue pack will die, maybe not immediately, but very quickly, help smooth out the clear even at such a high tier. Now, the other benefit, of course, is the damage soaking. It's effectively just a 25% health multiplier, which isn't the most exciting thing to have on an ascendancy, but especially when it's conditional on having the Sentinel actually summoned. But it is a defensive benefit at least. I just don't really count it so much as one because, again, like right here, Sentinel's dead. Would I have survived if it was alive there? Probably not still, but again, it was dead, so it did nothing in that moment defensively. The aura relics are also pretty insane. If you can leverage all three of them to some capacity, you're going to have a very good time with your damage. SRS does this very well, but so do some other things like physical-based spells. You may have also seen my video of me doing Shaper on a 5-link. That was very early into the character as I was prepping to go for my last couple Void Stones. I did the Maven fairly early as well, and that's not strictly because of the damage. The relics are providing a lot of damage. At that point, they're about half my damage, I believe. It's a little less than that now, but still, to have anywhere even close to that amount of damage provided from your ascendancy is amazing. And it is just very strong mechanically. Because you're a minion build, it's kind of a fire and forget sort of deal, where similarly to damage over time skills, you use the skill is going to deal damage on its own. You don't have to worry about continuously applying the damage. You are summoning the spirits a lot, but they'll do their own targeting. You don't need to constantly stand still and hold down a button. You can stutter step it kind of like you can with traps. And so the single target you remain very mobile. Mapping, you remain mobile. The only gripe I have right now with the character is my defense. I have made it to level 96 without a whole ton of deaths, not to the point of being annoying at least, but there is quite a bit you could do to scale both offensively and defensively. Defensively, I'm going to aim for a fourth bow if I can find one, along with Divine Flesh. It's a pretty common combo to shift your elemental damage to chaos, which gets around things like penetration from bosses, as well as apply armor to your chaos damage taken, so should increase survivability against elemental damage and specifically bosses a significant amount. I did attempt Uber Shaper on this character, and the defenses were my main problem. Offensively, it felt great even at like 3 million pinnacle DPS. I'm not trying to put the Ubers on like farm status or anything, I just wanted to see if I could do it. I got to the last phase before I portaled out, as in died 6 times, but that was way better than I thought I was capable of this early into the league. That was about day 8, which was day 4 or 5 of playing this character. So all in all, I was very impressed with the progress by that point. And I still feel like there's a lot I could do, again, both defensively and offensively for the character. On the offensive side, the build is looking for 2 things mainly. Looking for good, or early on I should say, some cluster jewels and abyss jewels. So for clusters, you want a Blessed Rebirth jewel so your SRS aren't dying all the time. I personally didn't have an issue with them dying or like my damage sustain. I think this clip right here is without Blessed Rebirth, this Maven kill. And with the mastery that gives your minions 5% life on minion death, I haven't felt like it's an issue at all. So definitely, take that early on. Later transition into a cluster jewel setup, not a problem. I also have a large minion damage cluster. I'll look at the POB after some of these clips and go into a little more detail. So there's the cluster jewel setup, and then abyss jewels. You really just want a lot of flat damage, physical especially. That gets scaled by your hatred, and then scaled into, or converted into fire damage through SRS. So that you run a dual curse setup using elemental weakness and flammability because I am dealing tri-elemental damage. Darkness Enthroned from Abyss is very common, and being able to put your 2 best Abyss jewels in it is going to net you a lot of damage. It's not a setup I have at the moment because I haven't focused too hard on Abyss, and the 1 belt I've gotten coincidentally only has 52% increased effective jewels. I want something probably at least like 80 or 90 before I switch over to that and actually craft some decent jewels. Beyond that, there are a lot of quality. So there are some alternate quality gems you can get to help improve your damage. Specifically, I don't remember if it's Divergent or Phantasmal SRS, but it is fairly rare. But you can get 2 extra SRS from 20% quality, 1 per 10% quality, which then opens up Ashes as an option. Obviously, most people aren't going to farm Ashes in solo Self-Found, but for anybody that wants a build that can do well at the start, but also have some scaling potential, which is what I tend to like, this type of build is great for that, for all the reasons listed. And I've just been having a really great time with it, surprised that I'm liking the minion playstyle so much. It's performing very well. I think even with a nerf, I might consider starting this next league because it has done so well for me. I've even been doing like Maven invitations with Destructive Toys, is that what it's called? The new Maven Keystone. I'll have a video coming out about that soon. And this build handles... Interesting death there. This build handles the extra map bosses very well, even in Guardian maps. So I don't take the Keystone off for Guardian maps. I will fight Conquerors and Elder and Shaper Guardians with the 1 to 3 extra bosses. No problem. In normal map bosses, actually, sometimes the boss dies so fast with this build that the Maven does not have time to summon the extra bosses. That's probably my biggest complaint about the build. And if that's the case, then, I mean, I really have no complaints about it, do I? Alright, that's enough of me rambling and suggesting and hyping it up. I will jump into the path of building to discuss some of my current gear and take a look at my damage and such. So here's the tree. Definitely some optimizations could be made in various ways, but I haven't really changed much since, well, initially leveling the character, really. For example, a path up through here, I probably won't do that in my finalized setup, assuming I take the build that far, which at the moment I'm planning to. I am probably going to path over here, take this jewel slot for a Glorious Vanity to convert Pain Attunement to Divine Flesh. Might pick up some of these surrounding nodes for a mastery if any of them get converted to something interesting. For example, the cast speed mastery here might be pretty good, or the unleash one. I see a lot of people dropping out of this area as well and just anointing Whispers of Doom. It's another valid option. I'm not manually casting curses. I have Arcanist Brand. So the cast speed doesn't do anything here. 4 points would be a pretty good save here. And if I'm dropping this setup and going down to either pathing up here to take this cluster or down towards the armor, depending on what I do, then that would be 6 points to Whispers of Doom, which is definitely worth anointing at that point. My cluster duels are not the best, but they're serviceable. So this is a 9 passive large cluster with only 2 notables. Could be an 8 passive with 3 notables, and that would be a lot better. Save a point and get more benefit, of course. This is a 6 passive medium cluster with Blessed Rebirth, as I mentioned. A 4 or 5 would be better because it would save me a point again. If I do need reservation efficiency, or I want to grab potentially a like Skitterbot setup, have the small cluster spot available here that I could dip into that for. I also don't know how mandatory Indomitable Army is at this point. I should probably spec out of it, spec into something else, and see how I do without it, and just be prepared to spec back into it. Because I don't know how worried I am about my Spectres or Golem or Sentinel dying. The SRS, of course, are pretty protected by Blessed Rebirth, about half their lifetime. Can keep good uptime with them through that alone, so I don't know how much I need to invest in minion life and or defenses at this point. So I may end up dropping Sacrifice as well. Although I do kind of want a defense mastery for the convocation still, so I guess we'll have to see. I'd actually probably drop this accuracy mastery here as well. So yeah, some optimizations that could be made, some jewels I could pick up. I'm a bit over on my dex amount because at level 96 didn't know what to dip into, so I just grabbed a 30 dex note because I have some current strains on my gear because of dexterity. Tattoos, I have one interesting one, which is +1 int. It is pretty significant. Let's see here if I take that off. It's about an 8.3% damage boost, which is very nice. Definitely not mandatory though. Do I have my full DPS enabled? Yes. Sitting at a little under 3 mil here. This doesn't include the Sentinel because its damage is somewhat unreliable. And the POB is a little undercooked. So like, for example, have my minions been created recently? A lot of them have. So that's some amount of damage boost, but not the amount that it's going to say. I am applying exposure with Elemental Army, and there's a good chance there's fire exposure in there. So that would be, you know, a decent damage boost. But it could also be cold, which is a damage boost, but less. So I just don't bother enabling it for now. Not really too bothered about getting my POB warrior on, really. And for the amount of time, I guess, I have invested into it, and the items I have so far, I'm very satisfied with 3 mil. In terms of the damage coming from gear, I think it is mostly jewels. My wand is decent. Need a sugar wand for the Desecrate and Flesh Offering setup. And other than that, it just has some damage, some crit chance, and some much needed lightning resistance. I need to find that somewhere else for whenever I replace my weapon. I don't know if I want to go for a +2 weapon. You can do that. If you find the appropriate fossils from Delve, you can roll a 1 in 12 chance to get a +2 minion wand. But I feel like I would rather go for the percentage scaling than anything else, because I currently have a lot of levels elsewhere. So level 21 gem, I have a +2 helmet that I found super early, possibly even on the RF character. This could be crafted better as well, with a prefixes cannot be changed, Veiled Chaos roll sort of deal. I risk giving up my life in that case, but it might still be worth it. So +1 or +2 there, +1 from the tree, of course. I do have a +1 amulet as well, so the gem is sitting at level 25 at the moment, which is a pretty decent spot. You know, levels are still going to get you some amount of damage, but it might not be worth me going so hard for them when I could get other stats on a weapon. And shield as well. Shield currently providing 8% increased damage, and that's it. So could get a lot more damage on here as well, whether I go for a level or some other vector by scaling my damage. Could also go for a life gain on hit shield, which is what I was considering at the start and probably will end up doing. Just another option for sustain. Time of need is decent for pinnacle fights, especially because if you know the mechanics, you know when you're going to have a bit of a breather to stand back and let your health recover. But it would be nice in like mapping scenarios, more difficult maps, to have some life gain on block. If I didn't want to go the 4th vow route for defenses, you could also get a +2 either Warlord or Shaper body armor. That's another fairly viable option for crafting in solo self-found. Or you could just do, you know, what I currently have, a pretty standard looking life and res armor with some phys mitigation, whether the Gravicious damage taken as elemental or straight PDR. Really just a lot of solo self-found friendly options, as I keep saying. By the way, for the damage, recent comment pointed me towards this. I'm using a support build exported as a support build, imported into this build, using a level 27 Hatred, Wrath, Anger with no aura effect to simulate the Elemental Relics. You can see here if I disable this, that doesn't affect my damage, so they essentially aren't applying their auras at the moment. So that's the workaround for that. Anyways, that is about it for me, I think. If you want to see more of this build in the future, or you want to see some potential guides on the build or some crafting for it, I do plan on making those, but I'd like to gauge interest if you've watched this far. Definitely thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.